Am I ready? Okay. Well, I'd like to call this public meeting to order, and I'd advise those joining us and in the public. This public meeting is required under the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for lands known as Northwest Area 2 and 3. The purpose and effect of the proposed amendments is to amend the City of St. Thomas's official plan to implement the recommendations contained in the amendment for the position for growth planning justification report and the population household projections report, and amend the zoning bylaw 50-88 to place the lands into residential holding zone R7 and as an interim measure until the policies of the areas are satisfied. Before we begin, members of the public are advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas before the bylaws are passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Further, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submission to the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas before the bylaws are passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of the appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Those wanting to be notified of the Council's decision should email customer service at customerservice@stthomas.ca and provide their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified can call customer service at 519-631-1680, extension 0, and provide that same information. Do any of the members have any disclosures of interest concerning any matters on this agenda? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk, what method of notice and when was the notice given to the public for the meeting?
Your worship, notice was provided in the St. Thomas Times Journal on Friday, February the 23rd, 2024.
I'm now going to introduce Jim McComb, the Manager of Planning Services, who will provide the background information on the proposed and present the draft bylaws. Mr. McComb?
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of council, members of the public who may be in attendance for tonight's meeting. Up on the screen right now, we have an introductory slide showing the locations of the lands that we're talking about, referred to as areas 2 and 3 from the position for growth study. The lighter gray area is area 2 and the darker gray area is area 3. There is an enlargement of that map again showing settlement area 2 in the lighter gray and area 3 in the darker gray. Essentially, area 2 is on the north side of Fingal Line, being essentially at the top of the hill as you go up Fingal Line, and area 3 is to the south of Fingal Line. And the shaded areas that you see in the gray patterns are essentially the tablelands at the top of the Kettle Creek Valley and its associated tributaries. So there is a draft amendment to the official plan that's been prepared for that, or for this proposal. It's official plan amendment number 110. Introductory statement that states that all of this part of the document entitled Part B, the amendment constitutes amendment number 110 to the official plan. This is the location plan that will be included with the official plan amendment, and you'll see in the next slide the reference to these various areas that are identified with as 1.1 through to 1.6, noting their areas. These are separate little parcels that are included within areas 2 and 3. So the first part of the amendment, item 1.1 states that Schedule A land use plan to the official plan of the City of St. Thomas is being amended by designating the lands that are identified as those blocks 1.1 to 1.6 from rural area to residential. And I must note that this is the first of an iterative process. I mean, this is simply amending the lands from rural area to residential. But as we'll see as part of the amendment, there's a layer of planning processes that have to be gone through before you'll see any shovels in the ground in this area. So the next slide shows the land use plan, and on the inset block that you can see up in this area, again, showing the area 2 and 3 lands going from this rural area, which is the sort of brownish color, into the yellow, indicating the residential designation. Item 1.2 states that Schedule E, which is a special development areas schedule to the official plan, is amended by designating the lands identified as, again, those blocks 1.1 to 1.6 to Special Development Area 6, and replacing the Special Development Areas 1 to 4 with Special Development Areas 1 to 4 and 6 in the legend. Here's that Schedule E. And again, we are talking about the lands up here in the northwest corner of the city, and you can see them in this in the heavy solid line with the number 6 designation on them. And the legend does refer to as Special Development Areas 1 to 4 and 6. And I'll have more information about that, what that Special Development Area policy means in a minute. So item 2.1 of the text of the amendment states that subsection 1.1.4 is amended by deleting the first sentence and replacing it with the following sentence, that the land use policies and designations are to guide development, redevelopment, and or infill intensification in the city of St. Thomas for the period ending in 2046. And this is again just adjusting the active period of the official plan to 2046. Going on with the amendment itself, the next deals with subsection 3.1, which is the population projections, stating that subsection 3.1.1 is deleted and replaced by a new subsection stating that a population of 62,200 persons by the year 2046 is projected, and this target reflects the anticipated growth patterns in the London housing market area. And in subsection 3.2, again, there's a subsection is deleted and replaced. It's 3.2.1, stating that the population capacity for the city of St. Thomas is as follows: projected 2046 demand for 4,772 low density, 1,718 medium density, and 1,615 high density residential units. Projected year 2046 gross residential land supply requirement to accommodate the projected housing demand is up to plus or minus 165 hectares. And council may recall when we were dealing with the Shaw Valley development that we did have a opinion piece submitted by Stantec to explain further about what those projections and the density projections all mean. And they're not hard and fast targets, but they are targets established under the provincial policy statement. Part 2.4, item 2.4 of the amendment states that the following new subsection 513.6, Special Development Area 6, areas 2 and 3 Northwest Block, is being added following subsection 513.5, which was a Lake Margaret Lakeshed Special Development Area. There are a number of subsections to this, and so I'll go through them for council and the public's benefit. So 513.6. Special Development Area 6 identifies lands in the northwest part of the city of St. Thomas that are planned for urban development as shown in Schedule E, Special Development Areas. 3 blocks of land brought into the city of St. Thomas from the township of Southwold in 1995 remain outside of the urban settlement area and are designated rural area in the city of St. Thomas official plan. A 4th area, which was Area 1, was redesignated from rural area to residential by OPA 97 in February of 2021. Based on the findings of the Position for Growth Planning Justification Report of February 2020 to accommodate urban development pressures in the city. Based on the findings of the addendum to the Position for Growth Planning Justification Report of August 2023, areas 2 and 3, as shown on the attached Appendix 1 Location Plan 2, have been designated residential on Schedule A land use plan to the official plan of the City of St. Thomas through OPA 110 to permit residential and supporting institutional land uses, including schools, parks and recreation facilities, convenience commercials serving day-to-day needs and places of worship on those lands. Sanitary servicing, water servicing, and transportation reviews are being completed to identify the requirements to accommodate urban development in areas 2 and 3. Subsection 513.6.1 states that in addition to the policies of section 2 to 10 of the official plan, the following special policies shall apply to the lands enclosed in heavy solid lines and identified as Special Development Area 6 on Schedule E. Policies include the following. Under I, areas 2 and 3 are self-contained development block that is surrounded by the Kettle Creek Valley lands on the north, east, and south, and the rural lands of the Township of Southold on the west. Given the size and location of the development block, which is approximately 140 hectares, a secondary plan will be required to provide a conceptual land use plan and planning framework to facilitate the creation of a sustainable residential neighborhood containing a range of housing opportunities along with school, park, and open space, convenience, commercial, and community facilities, and services to meet their day-to-day needs. Part 2 states that the secondary plan will provide the long-term vision, principles, land use concept, supporting neighborhood and community facilities, road and servicing requirements for areas 2 and 3. It will also ensure the protection and enhancement of the adjacent environmental features in the Kettle Creek Valley. The plan will provide policy direction for A, land use, natural heritage protection, and natural hazards mitigation. B, transportation, including active transportation and road infrastructure. C, convenience commercial, schools, parks, and open space network. D, municipal infrastructure needs such as sanitary, water, and stormwater management. And E, phasing and implementation of development, community facilities, roads, and infrastructure services. Part 3 states that residential development shall complement the natural beauty of the Kettle Creek Valley and associated woodlands. The aesthetic and environmental assets of the Kettle Creek Valley system, including the watercourse, valleys, slopes, and associated woodlands, shall be protected. Part 4 states that the city, in consultation with the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority, will confirm the terms of reference for a scoped addendum to the Lyndhurst subwatershed study that was just actually recently updated in August 2023 to guide development reviews from a natural heritage and natural hazard perspective on the subject lands. Part 5 states that development applications proposing encroachment into the adjacent Kettle Creek Ravine Valley lands will be required to prepare geotechnical studies establishing soil conditions and slope stability and environmental impact statements assessing encroachment impacts. Those studies will be used to define the top of bank line and establish the restrictions for the setback of buildings and structures from the top of bank on the affected properties. Part 6 states that development applications proposing encroachments into natural heritage features will be required to adhere to the environmental setbacks and monitoring requirements established by the EIS prepared in support of the proposed encroachment. Part 7 states that provisions for elementary school sites shall be made in consultation with the public and separate school boards at the draft plan of subdivision stage of land development. Where practical, a school site should be located adjacent to and combined with a neighborhood park. Part 8 states that the location of neighborhood parks and open space linkages shall be defined and secured through the plan of subdivision process. Under Part 9, a broad range of housing in terms of tenure, size, location, and cost shall be permitted in accordance with the provincial policy statement and the City of St. Thomas population and housing forecast as updated from time to time. Residential subdivision design should facilitate a sense of neighborhood identity and incorporate community features such as walkways and parks. 10, efforts shall be made by the city through the development approvals process to facilitate the long-term implementation of a pedestrian bikeway system that connects and links the Kettle Creek Valley lands, Mill Creek Valley lands, Lake Margaret, St. Thomas Elgin Education and Recreation Complex, Pinafore Park, and the neighborhood parks in the South Block. Medium and high density housing forms, including affordable housing, shall be located adjacent to or in proximity to Fingal Road to facilitate access to public transit and ancillary community services and reduce traffic on the internal local roads. Part 12, lower density housing forms should include a range of housing types and subdivision designs to meet the needs for attainable, additional, and affordable ownership and rental housing, the move-up market for larger homes, and the seniors market. Part 3 of the amendment is a consolidation of the two map parts that we dealt with. So Schedule A land use plan is going to be deleted and replaced with a consolidated new Schedule A. That'll be Schedule 1 to the amendment. And it'll appear without the inset showing, but essentially this is what it'll look like. And finally, Schedule E, the special development area schedule, will also be updated and consolidated to incorporate the amendments. And so this will be the consolidated special development areas schedule. So finally, under part 3, implementation or interpretation, it's the implementation interpretation of the amendment shall be in accordance with the respective policies of the City of St. Thomas official plan. Your worship, that is the draft, if there's any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. McComb. Madam Clerk, have you received any written submissions?
Your worship, we have not received any written submissions.
Okay. I will first ask council if they have any questions of Mr. McComb. Councillor Peters, and then Councillor Woodkey.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Jim, a couple times in your presentation, you made reference to commercial day-to-day needs and convenience commercial. Can you define what that is? Is that means you could only have like a gas station with a convenience store, or does that mean you could have a full-scale grocery store?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Peters. Earlier in council's meeting, you had a question for Mr. Pompili about certain studies that we are doing to keep track of our commercial needs. And so those foundation studies will all be feeding into the secondary planning process. So it's through the update of that commercial study that it'll help to identify exactly what types of commercial uses we need out in this area. Because it is physically separated from the rest of the city by a fairly broad Kettle Creek Valley. And so when people want to pick up a jug of milk or a loaf of bread, they're not necessarily going to want to jump in their car and have to drive all the way across town. So we'll be looking at that as a part of that commercial study update.
My second question is, when you look at the topography of these parcels of land, I call them islands. You know, I can think of one down at the intersection of Sunset and Wellington and up on top of the hill. It's just, it literally, if you look on your map there, it is literally an island. There's another parcel I can think of south side of Fingal Road. I know the site, it's about 13 acres, but you have to actually go through somebody else's property to get to that property. Again, it's like an island. So as we start to study some of these parcels or look at the whole of it, who looks at whether or not there's even development potential of some of those sites?
Mr. McComb.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, through you to Councillor Peters. So again, I put up the map here that shows the various settlement areas. And in a way, like when you take a look at that, you can physically see what you're talking about, that some of these areas, especially in that light gray, there are some almost like little pockets that are shown there. And in fact, just before when council was in closed session, I did have an opportunity to have a conversation with one of the owners of some of this land. And so their concern is, how do we make sure that, you know, our lands can be accessed for future development? And the short answer to that is the city will be ensuring that throughout the development process. So what we're not going to want to see is any one of these areas somehow cut off and become an island unto itself. We're going to want to make sure that that connectivity is maintained as each phase of these lands develops.
Councillor Peters.
My final question is, again, as you pointed out, this is the first steps in many studies to come. Will one of those studies that comes back will it be looking at how we service these lands?
Mr. McComb.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Absolutely. That is going to be one of the things that we will be looking at along with our colleagues in environmental services. They already have an idea as to the general overall method that we're going to get services up to this area. But through subsequent study, they're going to work out the details, how big the pipes have to be, the depth into the ground, you know, how they expand from Fingal Line out into settlement areas 2 and 3. So we will be examining all those details because the last thing we want is to run into a problem down the road that somehow there's an issue with this, you know, brand new services that are going out there. But absolutely, that is going to be one of the areas that will be studied.
Okay, Councillor Woodkey.
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. McComb, so when I look at this on my screen, I see, you know, it's long and narrow, all right? And when it comes time for subdivision plans, is there any discussion with the township of Southold regarding, like, I'm just looking at, if I was to put a road through settlement area 2, like just even a roadway through there cuts down on the development potential. Do you ever talk to Southold to say, hey, can we put a road in on your side? You know what I mean? How does that work? Because obviously somewhere down the road, I would think that that area of Southold will become developed. How do you guys go about dealing with that at this phase? Do we just stay in our own lane and do our own thing? Do we get together as Southold and say, hey, down the road, you know, and create like a plan for that area? How does that work if you answer that question? Thank you.
Mr. McComb?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Wookie. So that area of Southold Township that's immediately adjacent to this, that's all designated for agricultural use. So they have not identified that as a future settlement area. Having said that, we do know that they have expressed some interest. Our counterparts with environmental services had some discussion with Southold's counterparts doing the same thing. There is interest to see if perhaps we could get services out to the school. The school is interested. And also the Home for the Aged that's out there would be possibly interested. Very, very preliminary level discussions at this point as to is it feasible to even get the services out there. So while that area is certainly in their official plan designated long-term for agricultural use, they have not identified a settlement area there. We are looking at those areas where there may be some interest in some development or extension of services or something like that.
Go ahead, Councillor Wiki.
Thank you. So therefore, we're not counting on having, like, we can't have a arterial road or, you know, going through design there, like everything has just got to be on our land, all the roads through, all the roads coming back. And just, we got to stay obviously in our part and that's the way it is, because it just seems like, you know, maybe you run a roadway right along the boundary between us and Southold and to maximize the space there. But I just have it looks like a real challenge to do useful things with that property. Thank you.
Mr. McComb, on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe I could give as an example in the Miller's Pond subdivision. There is a road allowance that goes through the subdivision that essentially is going to dead end at the psych hospital lands, which are in Central Logan. So as these lands develop, the developers may turn around and provide a similar sort of dead end, just in case at some point in the future, if the Township of Southold can support a new settlement area being created in that area and take those lands out of agriculture, that would at least facilitate the transportation linkage. But again, we'll be looking to work with the developers in that regard as they bring out the various phases of the development.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking, how those roads stub into the psych hospital lands. Thanks.
Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. I'm kind of interested in the school. When you talk about Miller's Pond, they designated an area for a school and 5 years later, they don't build one. So would not Southold Public School be part of this subdivision where the kids would go there? Would you, because you wouldn't build a school automatically right away. They'd have to go somewhere. So Southold Public School, could it be expanded or would it be used or do you have to build one in the city?
Mr. McComb, if you
Thank you,
can.
Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Herbert. As this area begins to develop, we will be circulating the development applications as always to the school boards. And it's up to the school boards at that time when they receive those notices to inform the city as to whether or not they require a school block. We do know that the school boards, both the separate school board and the public school board, have expressed a lot of interest right now in St. Thomas in establishing school sites. So whether the timing of the development of these lands will work for them in identifying a site here, because as I said, by the time we get through some of these foundation studies, and it's probably going to be a couple of years before you see shovels in the ground here. And it may not be soon enough for them, but we will continue to circulate the development applications to them. That provides them their opportunity to identify whether or not they think they need a site.
Mr. McComb, if I can add to that too, with new legislation, there's a requirement for consultation between the school boards and us in a deeper fashion perhaps than there used to be. So we're having many more. And I think even next week, we have another consultation with the Thames Valley District School Board about what their future looks like, because as St. Thomas grows, we've been sharing all along, here's what our growth looks like. Will you come along with us? Will you take our help too? And so I know, Mr. McComb, you've been helping with that too, that we'll keep sharing data back and forth, hoping that schools get put in the right places and are the right size. Okay. Further questions from council? All right. Well, now we'll open up the meeting to questions from the public. For those attending who have not already submitted their concerns or comments to the city, if you are listening on a computer or tablet or smartphone, click the raise hand icon. And if you've called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. The questions will be taken in sequential order. And when given the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the clerk's record, so we're sure to have that. Any members of the public have comment? And if we have them from upstairs, do we want them to come down to the podium or see if we can hear from up there? Let's try it. Let's try it. Yeah, how's your voice? Go for it. Can we do that? Mr. McComb?
Your worship, yes, we can provide copies of the draft amendment, the mapping, as much of the background studies as we have available. Yes, we can provide that. I can also provide a copy of the Stantec report that I referred to earlier. So if people have questions about the projections and those targets and that sort of thing, that report's quite helpful in understanding what those mean.
Thank you, Mr. McComb.
Sorry, your worship, I didn't catch the gentleman's name and address.
Oh, yeah, name and address. I'm very sorry. My fault. Super. Give it your best shot.
39770 line. I'm the first one right at the end of the line. And you were just talking about using these coastal townships to build a road on. Well, that's my lane. And it's Jim Lyle's lane too.
Good.
And we're not real pleased with that. My first question has to do with the Watson report. Have you received and approved the Watson report?
Jim?
Thank you, Your Worship. The Watson report is the population and employment projections report. We had a draft report in our hands in 2022. That was going to be one of the foundation studies that was going to be feeding into our overall OP update. We had not brought that forward to council because it was going to be part of a larger package once we proceeded with the OP update. Then PowerCo happened.
Right.
So that particular report was never brought forward to council. It is informing this particular OPA, but we are also working on an update to that report to take into account the impacts of PowerCo. And that is the version of the report that will be brought forward to council for their consideration and adoption, hopefully at a date not too far in the future. We're just finishing some discussions with Watson, and we should have that report in front of council.
So it's a updating because of the new OPA?
The 2022 report was being prepared as a part of the OP update, the comprehensive review of the official plan that we were preparing. Then, as I said, PowerCo happened, and
Right.
we realized that those projection numbers as PowerCo develops are all going to essentially go out the window. So we asked Watson to update that report. We
Right.
have a draft of that. We are working with them on
Becoming-
finalizing that, and it will be presented to council in the not too distant future.
Follow up, Mr. Gill?
The thing is, everything that we're doing is dependent upon the output of that one.
Okay.
Everything, because basically we say we need 105 hectares of land to house the people.
Mhm.
And Watson says how many people are the people. And the Watson report also says that we're gonna have, I'm just using round numbers here. 5,000 low density housing, that's your standard of suburbia.
Right?
And 1,500 medium density.
Yeah.
Which is, medium, and 1,500 high density.
Right?
I think that as far as a city that needs working man housing, we probably should have a whole lot more high density and a whole lot less neighbors circulating through the countryside.
Right.
We're talking about climate change, we're talking about water source degradation, all those things, we talk about it. But when it comes down to the climate thing, the developer makes easily a lot more profit off a 3,000 square foot house on a 24 square foot lot than he does on high density housing, and this seems to be development driven. And I'm just thinking maybe we shouldn't go quite so quick until we can get council approved on that 62,000 population.
Okay.
40,000.
Huh?
4 years ago, we predicted we'd have 50,000.
Mhm.
Now, until we got 62,000, and we're gonna have a whole lot more road.
I agree with you, Mr. Gill, that we need to continue to improve our density to a far greater, and as you'll see what St. Thomas is currently doing, we have a lot of density under construction. I think we can look forward to that maybe being our new way of looking at it too.
If council can continue to work towards that goal, I know the chairman and staff would really like to do that.
Yeah.
They would really like to see more trees and less action.
Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, that end piece down there, far end of the long skinny thing, I think it was Mr. Buki.
Yeah,
That is a horse.
yes,
There are viable horses too,
yeah. Well, then things, the grass will grow really well then. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Further questions from the public? Do we have anybody online with a hand up? I do. I have somebody named Harvey or Harry. Right? Harry, if you've unmuted, please go ahead. Tell us who you are, your address, and ask your question, please.
It's Mike here. I'm at 40022 Fingal Line. Real quick question. The Monroe subdivision, that's that little section on the north side of Fingal Line as you get to the top of the hill. Why is that parcel being excluded from the study?
Jim? Sorry, Mr. McComb, I'm being very informal tonight.
Thank you, Worship. Jim's fine. It's not depicted as part of the shaded areas because it's already designated residential. So that's the primary answer to the question.
The gray
Is
areas
it
were
being-
changing to residential, and that's why.
That's right. The gray areas would be changing from rural area to residential. Monroe subdivision is already designated residential. Having said that, all those foundation studies that we're doing, the special development area policies will incorporate that area as well. So they'll be examining that in terms of, possible sewage connections and that sort of thing. It's all on private services right now. So, yeah.
Great. Further questions or comments?
Hope somebody else would bring it up, but I would think that it would avoid a bunch of problems with roads taking up too much area. If you use area number 3 on the south side of Fingal Line there, and Johnny McCabe would be really happy. And,
You have that in writing?
no, just words across the front of the wall.
Yes.
And because that is really close to where all of the sources of water and sewer is going to be coming online.
Right.
It's easily accessible, and there is enough land in there to use 40% of the iron 62,000. And if we went to more high level, high density housing there, we could probably do everything we need for the next 10 years right on that.
It'd be a good start. Well, we'll continue to talk higher density and further questions or comments? Any other questions or comments from council? Councilor Peters.
I asked this before, but a lot of the public weren't here at the time, at a previous, when we first dealt with this. Jim, can you just explain why we are not looking at Area 4 at this time? That sort of fits in to Mr. Gill's question of adjoining parcels of land and common property owners. Why aren't we looking at Area 4?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Peters. The principal issue with Area 4 is access, trying to get up the road that goes up past the old landfill site and up. It's very, very difficult to get traffic, servicing, everything up there. We do know from, again, a very preliminary standpoint that services can be brought up to areas 2 and 3, just going straight up Fingal line. It's going to be gravity feed from there down to across the bridge and to the existing sanitary sewers that were just installed on Sunset. And that pipe up at the top of the hill can go as deep as it needs to go to facilitate gravity feed from either area 2 or 3. But the prospects to service Area 4, I know Environmental Services has had a look at it and they've advised that it's going to be very, very difficult to get anything up there.
But they're up to a challenge. No, I'm just kidding. Further questions or comments? Anyone online? Anyone in the public? I'll ask one more time. We've got Councilor Herbert. Okay, are you one of those? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, just a question for Jim there. Is the assumption that everybody at the top of Fingal Hill will all go on the sewage, or will they stay on their septics?
Worship, through you to Councillor Herbert, that'll have to be a game time decision of council of the day when the services are brought up as to whether or not they're going to be requiring the connection.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see, wait until again, we have further details on exactly how deep those services are, where they're going to be and that sort of thing, and whether they're going to require existing development to connect.
Jim, I would expect a number of these questions will come back a number more times. This one's to change it to residential and then start to do the planning towards questions like Councilor Herbert's.
Your Worship, you're absolutely right. And I would just encourage the public that are interested in these lands to keep an eye out on the secondary planning process. There will be meetings that we'll likely host open houses with. We find that that's probably the best way to get across some of this information as it folds out. The open houses are a great informal way for people just to approach staff and the consultants and ask their questions and that. So as those details roll out, we will certainly have opportunities for the public to be informed and ask the questions.
Okay, the mayor will ask one more time about questions from the public, questions from those online, or questions from council. Mr. Gill, you go ahead.
This bill, will the concerned landowners, what we do, will we be notified in writing before they're out of the meeting? If someone don't get the Times Journal, and I don't know.
Mr. McCombs, how will you solve that problem?
Thank you, Worship. Typically what we do for whether it's a public meeting like this or whether it's an open house is we do publish in the Times Journal, but we do send direct notification to anybody who lives in the affected area as well as anybody within 120 meters of the affected area. So, and we'll also start to post signs on in the road in the area to allow them to know again that there's an open house or a meeting coming up.
Well, I'll ask you or the clerk, if someone's given comment or said they're looking for further information through customer service or comment, would they be contacted for if there was an open meeting?
Your worship, yes, we do. In fact, when it comes to the, like for this process here for the official plan amendment, when it comes to council's time to make a decision, we not only just send it in this case, the applicant is the city. So, but we'll send it to everybody who attended. Anybody who's let the clerk's department know, customer service know that they would like to be informed of council's decision. We send it to everybody, and we'll send it to anybody who attended, whether or not they spoke or not, just to let them know. Obviously they have an interest, so we'll send it to them.
Okay, one last time, do any members of the public or members of council or anyone online have any further questions, comments, or statements? Well, then, in the opinion of the mayor, the public's been given fair opportunity to express their views regarding the proposal. Everyone's been given fair opportunity. If there is no further questions, please be advised that any person wishing further information on the actions of council regarding the passing of a bylaw for the proposed amendments should email customer service at customerservice@stthomas.ca and provide their name and address. Then those that do not have access to a computer should be, and still wish to be notified, should call customer service at 519-631-1680, extension 0. Provide your name, your address, and that you would like further information on this public meeting. This public meeting is now concluded.